I bought a laptop off of eBay for a fairly great price. My previous laptop recently broke, and I was really in need of a new one. I searched on eBay and saw the ad. It was a miracle. It was a new H Pavilion at such a low price. Strangely low now that I think about it. I was so hyped that I immediately bought it. Being excited and kind of dumb, the thought of it being a scam never crossed my mind once when I was buying it. As I waited a while for the laptop to arrive, I'd constantly go back to the page and look at it with anticipation. I was excited. It felt like Christmas. Just over a week later, the laptop finally arrived. I was a bit annoyed when I noticed that there was not much protection for the laptop in the box it came in. But luckily, it was fine. I opened the laptop and immediately saw a sticky note on the screen. It was a 4-digit PIN. I was very confused, of course. Why would the seller not remove their account and give me their PIN? Why wouldn't they do a hard reset before shipping it? Of course, I used the PIN and signed into the account. My curiosity tends to defeat me. The profile picture for the Outlook account, the picture you see when you put in your PIN, was solid black and a bit eerie. I signed in. There was nothing really special at first. The background was a standard default image Microsoft has with computers. It was a beach. I assumed all of the files and everything would be cleared, but the seller left a few things in the files. What sensible person would leave their files open to a stranger's viewing? There were things. Photos and a video. There were photos of woods and a river. Woods were first, and then the river came. They didn't seem planned out, though. Most as if the photos were accidents. They weren't symmetrical, and some were just blurry, which is pretty bad if I'm being critical. There was also a single picture of a room. It looked very simple and plain. It reminded me of one of those liminal space pictures you'd see in those YouTube compilations. Beige walls, a bed, a large vent, and a light. The light made the room look strange. It was warm and dim. Very off. The next thing was a video. It confused me nonetheless. Honestly, it creeped me out. Off-putting audio and these weird pictures of that Jonathan Galindo meme. Here's where it gets weird. This video was titled in the files as Jonathan Galindo, Mofor. I could hear moans and some shuffling. Earth, Wind, and Fire September was also playing in the background. After a few rewatches, I was very uneasy. I wanted to show people, so I posted this to my channel. Here it is. I remember going back to the ad on eBay, and it was gone. The seller's name wasn't Jonathan Galindo, though. His name was Thomas, shipped from a town in Utah. It wasn't a real town or address. I don't know if this was all some prank pulled by the seller, but if it was, it would be very far-fetched. What person would go through the process of setting up an eBay ad, making this video, putting it on a nice computer, and selling it for such a low cost, even giving sign and information for his account? I don't get it. That was all there was. I tried searching for more things, kind of wanting to see some more. There wasn't. I'm no tech genius, but I do think that there is nothing further to analyze. Just a weird video. After messing around on the laptop for a bit, I decided to call it a night and head to bed. As I tried to sleep, I couldn't help but think about that damn video. The uncanny groans resonated in my head. I began to piece together the pictures and the video, making up theories and ridiculous conclusions. Was someone killed? Was their body dragged through the woods and dumped into a river? Were they killed in that room? I caught myself. I had to stop. The next day, I got up at around 6:30 in the morning. I went to class for a while and came back home later. I went to my laptop and sat down, hoping to unwind for the rest of the day. I opened up my laptop and saw it. It took me a second to notice. The profile picture wasn't solid black anymore. It was changed. I sunk into my chair, feeling hot flashes run through me. I sat there for a good minute or two, analyzing and trying to make out what the picture was. It was a close-up, semi-blurry picture of a door and its doorknob. I wiped everything off. I began deleting the photos and the video from the files in a frantic scramble, and I also removed the account from the laptop. Stupidly, I didn't get rid of the laptop. I needed it, and my mind would do anything to prevent me from destroying it. I had to get to work anyway. I'm a musician. I also make films with my good friend, so I make the soundtracks. I began to install all of the software I use to create the music. After about an hour, I was all set. As I began, I lost complete track of time. I had been writing and recording for hours, also going to the bathroom and getting a drink a few times. The video came back to me. Jonathan Galindo, I said to myself. I looked up the name on Google and saw its affiliation with the Blue Whale Challenge. That challenge, where people would harm or kill themselves, was concerning, like the concept of Mamo, the supposed Jonathan Galindo, would message people on social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, and a few others. After a while of reading stories about Jonathan, I was uneasy. I personally found Jonathan scarier than Mamo. His creepy, goofy Mickey Mouse makeup definitely added to the uncanniness. Then I saw something. My heart dropped to my stomach. The light on my webcam was on. It had been on the entire time, and I'd been too distracted to even notice. I sat there in shock, frozen in time, as I stared at the small light. I quickly regained my attention and slammed the screen down, shutting it. That was it. I finally came out of denial and took the laptop, heading outside at a quick pace. I opened the laptop and spread it against the curb, stomping down hard. It broke into two. I threw it into my trash bin. I was terrified. How long has he been watching me? Who the hell is this guy? Questions raced through my mind. Is this guy even from Utah? Of course I called the cops. I was on the phone with 911. They said they'd send 2 cars over to check around. Honestly, I don't think they cared. I think they just sent them to check, so I'll calm down. After a 5-minute search, they told me that I'd be fine, and that there are just creeps out there who will do anything to scare people. I angrily protested in my mind. Scare people? I'm in danger, but I think they were right. I didn't sleep that night. I kept my lights on, blinds closed, doors and windows locked, and I just stayed up and watched TV. I quickly forgot about the whole incident. Of course, I still think about it. I sometimes go and watch the video on YouTube. I finally got around to saving up and purchasing a new laptop from a Microsoft store. The incident was in the past, and I stopped worrying. I remember going to bed one night and doing my usual routine. I was laying in bed and looking at my door, daydreaming about new ideas for music I could write. That's when it hit me. That profile picture that was black and changed to the picture of the door and doorknob. That was my bedroom door. Throughout my entire life, my parents have always left the TV on at night. We are demanded that we leave no devices running in the living room, and that we never go into the living room from 1 a.m. to 6 a.m. When me and my sister were kids and very curious, our parents had to give us sleeping pills to keep us asleep so we wouldn't go down. They put up alarms in case we were near the stairs at night. Alarms that were loud enough to wake my parents up, but not loud enough for anyone else in any other room to hear. Some days they would complain about the electricity bills being high. Me and my sister would just ask them to leave the TV off to save electricity, but they never listened and said it was mandatory. Me and my sister is called Megan. She is 18, and I am called Christopher. I am 16. We were going to be left home alone for a week while my parents were on vacation. Every night while my parents were gone, my sister had the responsibility of leaving the TV on. On the 3rd day of my parents' absence, I left my Alexa plugged into the wall, and it was still running. Normally, my parents would check the living room before heading to bed. Since Megan had already turned the static on and gone to bed, there was no one to turn the Alexa off. I went to bed, and I was woken up at 2. 57A, toe loud smashing. I got up and went to the stairs to go down and see what the commotion was. My sister grabbed me by the arm, and she was already standing crouched in the hallway beside the stairs. "Don't go down," she said quietly. "Remember what Mom and Dad told us. We can never go down the stairs under any circumstances." I told her it didn't matter and that this was urgent, but no matter how much I wanted to, she wouldn't let me. Around 20 minutes later, the sound stopped, and my sister went to her room, but lay there awake. I, on the other hand, pretended to go back to sleep, but snuck by and went down the stairs. I checked my phone on the way. It was 3:37 a.m. I crouched near the door and peeked into the living room. I saw a black figure. I would say it was around 7 feet tall. No hands or any facial features, just a pitch. Black creature staring into the static. My first assumption was that the static was to keep the creature at bay. My Alexa was smashed to bits. I was about to go upstairs and get me and my sister out of the house. But then, at that moment, my phone buzzed. A YouTube notification popped up, and my phone made noise. When my husband first hit me, I wasn't surprised. I wasn't even hurt, at least not in the physical sense. I had been expecting it for a while. Every time, a muscle in his jaw twitched or his breathing slowed. A short fuse is ready to explode. At first, it was words murmured under his breath and a disapproving shake of his head. Then there was the frustration, along with an impatience reserved for children who don't know better, or an untrained pet. The way he spoke to me slowly became more and more hateful, his vile words often puncturing me like knives. The worst came when he was drunk, which was pretty often. But he wasn't half as brave when he was hungover. He never apologized, instead blaming his bad temper on work-related stress and saying I only added to it. Basically, he was a poor excuse for a man. The first time he actually swung his fist, he punched a hole in our wall, all because I accidentally bought the wrong kind of beer. For days, the hole stayed untouched, wide like a yawning mouth. Every time I looked at it, I knew that I was next in line. As for the beer, he still drank all of it. At one point, he even tasked me with patching up the hole, either by my own hand or with my own money. A vase flew by my head when I called him crazy. I learned after that not to talk back, even if it didn't change anything. Not long after, when my husband's fist got tired of plastering glass, my flesh sufficed. In a way, I was almost offended by how he didn't consider me first, even for this. Always on the back burner, the toy forgotten in the back of the dresser, the ghost that watched things unfold for everyone else. But you know what the worst part is? I couldn't leave him. See, when I married him, I didn't do it out of love. I did it out of a need so great that it was almost tangible, threatening to consume me. I was young and very poor, desperate to get out of my parents' shabby little house. They wouldn't miss me anyway. I was one of 7 kids they couldn't feed or care for. They probably didn't even remember me. Frank, my husband, was a little older than me, a college dropout who had a job as a mechanic. He wasn't ugly, not necessarily, but girls weren't throwing themselves at him either. He had a bit of a mean face too, with dark, flat eyes and early onset wrinkles from frowning so much. He was a good kisser though. I'll give him that. We met after my father almost totaled his old pickup truck, bringing it in for repairs. He really couldn't afford. In Frank, I saw an opportunity, and my need overpowered any feelings of warning. We both just settled for each other, unconsciously knowing there wouldn't be anything better in our shitty little town. We got married as soon as I graduated high school, moving in together soon after. Our wedding was about as romantic as you'd expect. Small town chapel with all the guests sitting on the groom's side. His lips tasted like greasy gas station taquitos when we kissed to seal the ceremony. I got a job waitressing and also helped stock at the supermarket a couple times a week. We were definitely struggling, but our crammed apartment was infinitely better than my childhood home. The days began to blend into each other, turning into months and then years. Those first few years weren't so bad. They were monotonous. Yes, but at least we mostly stayed out of each other's way and focused on making enough to pay our bills. He was a heavy drinker like my father. and his party days never really seemed to end. Most nights, he was too drunk to do anything but yell and pass out, with me cleaning up the mess behind him. Things went bad when we found out I couldn't have children. We, and when I say we, I mean just him, had been trying for a while with no luck, and a trip to the doctor brought us clarity. It was out of my control, obviously. And while I was a little sad, I was also infinitely thankful. It was a blessing in disguise. To him, this news was only a curse. He made sure to always remind me that I was a defective woman, that it had been a mistake to marry me, that he had lost his prime years being with me. Blah, 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 blah. He was fucking insufferable, but I did nothing and said nothing when he started fucking younger girls. At least he had left me alone when it came to, well, that, I can't lie and say that I hadn't dreamed of having a daughter one day. Perhaps if I wound up somewhere much better in life, with a stable job that paid me well enough, and the unshakable courage to stand up for myself, I'd run away with my daughter and be the parent I desperately needed as a child. I would have named her Cassie, and it would have been us against the world. I was stupid enough to dare to hope. I knew that to bear his child and bring it into this world would be to condemn it to a life of suffering. I would never forgive myself for it. I would never forgive myself for it. I cried often when he wasn't home, but after a while, I ran out of tears. Life had never been lonelier. You may think I'm a coward, but I don't really care. I don't think I need to reiterate that I couldn't afford a fucking divorce, and going to bed with bruises was better than sleeping in alleyways, reeking of piss. I still had some sense of self-worth. Still, I had my way of dealing with things. My own dirty little secret. During the day, I was the perfect wife, placid and quiet and always of service. I packed his lunch in the mornings, along with extra strong coffee to nurse his hangovers. I kept the house impeccable, paid bills on time, and learned how to cover up the evidence of his violence on my body. I had deep, tooth-shaped grooves on my wrists, from holding in my screams, so I always wore long sleeves. I learned early on that making any sort of noise would only make things worse for me. Nobody suspected a thing, perhaps because they didn't care to look too closely. At night, as I lay awake in bed, I thought of carnage, in all the violent ways I wanted payback, be it by my hand or not. In reality, I could never actually bring myself to get physical like that. I hadn't thought it possible for me to even conjure such scenarios. But years of repressed anger and hatred can really bring out the worst in a person. It all had to go somewhere. These thoughts followed me into dreams, where my imagination ran free. I dreamt of graceful arcs of blood spurting out of his jugular, staining our eggshell walls. How his large intestine would spool out of his sliced abdomen like unused yarn. I snapped one of his rib bones, meat off my teeth. And suddenly, I wasn't myself in those dreams. There was a creature, once so alike to me, yet so different at the same time. At first, it was hard for me to discern its features, but they became clearer with every passing night. It had my hair, a dirty blonde that I always hated, but it was matted and falling off in chunks, exposing bald craters. It had no eyes, nose, or ears, but the mouth took up most of the space needed for those. Jutting out like an animal's maw, it was long and spindly, and when I dreamt of it crawling atop my husband, it reminded me of an arachnid closing in on a fly. It was a beautiful nightmare. The sight of it felt familiar too, like it had always been there, an extension of my flesh that had been waiting for me to unearth it at the right time, a projection of the unfathomable strength and brutality I wished I possessed during the daytime. So naturally, I latched onto it, addicted to the nocturnal rush of adrenaline. Nobody could take this carnage away from me. I began to wake up feeling more refreshed and alive than I'd ever been, like I had been practicing lots of self-care and catching up on years worth of rest. I was sleeping a lot better, drifting through my day with ease and a syrupy sweet smile plastered on my face. Someone at work even told me I was glowing. asking if I was pregnant, to which I bluntly responded, "I'm infertile." He didn't think it was funny, but the look on his face was priceless. Not that I cared what he or anyone else thought of me, for that matter. Making friends wasn't really a priority, given that I was in survival mode 24/7. The crazy thing is, I did feel like I wasn't alone anymore. There was an overwhelming sense of peace that had suddenly flooded me, and at the very back of my mind, there was a reassuring voice that I couldn't quite hear, but still understood. The beast fed off of my hatred and rage, deepening my thirst for revenge. At times, I thought perhaps I was losing it. But would that really be so terrible? I would have welcomed living in a muddled reality where I had the upper hand. For 2 weeks, my husband even kept his hands off of me. He avoided me at all costs instead of berating me for every little thing. He slept away instead of bringing girls to the house. The bruises on my body were healing, turning a soft yellow and red against my pale skin. Things seemed okay for once. That was until the night one of his many skanks fed him some new drug, an amphetamine of sorts, and he came home cross-eyed and drooling like an animal. It was the middle of the night when he barged into our room, bellowing some nonsense that my barely awake mind couldn't comprehend. At the moment, I thought it was more annoying than frightening. I got up and tried to coax him into calming down so he could get into bed and get some sleep. But he wouldn't listen. He swung his big, beefy arms as I tried to reach for him, smacking me across the face in the process. His pupils were wide and dark, swallowing his irises in a vortex of nothingness. His breath alone could light a raging fire with a single spark. If only I had thought to get a lighter or a box of matches. What a more poetic way to go than by the cleansing flame. For the first time in all our time together, I thought enough was enough. In a blind act of bravery, I shoved him and he lost his balance, falling onto the mirror that hung on the door and shattering it. When his mind registered what I had just done, he looked at me with an animalistic rage. He didn't even seem to notice that his arm was bleeding, full of tiny cuts. We were both tense. Our bodies were coiled like springs about to snap. I felt powerful in that moment, but it was a feeling that quickly died down. He was the first to move, and he was so fast I was barely able to react. From 1 second to the next, he was holding a shard of glass and advancing on me. Once more, he had all control over me, snatching all that power I felt for even a fraction of a second. He swung wildly, screaming, "I'm going to kill you," all while I scurried back quickly, barely out of reach of the shard. In my haste, I tripped over a pillow and fell backwards for what felt like an eternity. Time slowed down until suddenly there was a sickening crack at the back of my skull. Then there was only darkness. I had been snuffed out of existence in an instant, quietly, without so much as a gasp. Or so I thought. I wasn't sure how long I was passed out for, but I woke up to a squelch and the acrid, coppery smell of blood. My vision swam, and I lied there on the floor as I tried to blink away the splitting headache. A movement on the bed caught my eye, and I stared hard, trying to make out what I was seeing. A long, thin arm sliced through the air, sharpening into a right angle as a bloody hand gripped the lower edge of the bed frame. My eyes followed the pale flesh, and I saw a flash of pink-stained teeth, long and thin as fingers. On the walls, large crimson Rorschach stains. The image was so familiar that I thought for a moment that I was in a dream again, though a more vivid one. The pain grounded me, as did the memory of what had caused me to pass out. Breathing mechanically, I found some strength within me and slowly sat up. There was more blood under me, and the back of my head felt slick and warm. I placed a hand down to keep myself upright, but instead of feeling the wooden floor, there was something tough and sinewy. The bed creaked, and I looked up, my mind unable to process what was in front of me. The creature from my dream smiled, which looked weird given its elongated mouth. It was covered in blood and gore, but seemed intact. It had my husband pinned underneath its body, one long hand pressed against his chest. He was unconscious, bruised and battered, with a couple bites here and there. Beside the creature, something long uncoiled off the side of the bed and snaked on the floor, underneath my hand, and was still going. It was sickeningly white, pale blue and purple in color. One end seemed to be connected to the creature's stomach, while the other. Instinctively, I reached a hand up towards the back of my head, where the edge of my nightstand hit my skull. The other end was firmly attached to the nape of my neck, going into a small, fleshy crater that should have been my demise. That's when it hit me. An umbilical cord. The creature had freed itself from the dark womb of my unconscious mind and out into reality. My dreams were the gestation, with the creature growing stronger every night. I nourished it, fed it, and even came to love it. I was a mother, despite what I had been told. I was not broken, useless, or any of the other things my husband called me. I was the one in control of my life and my body. I moved and the creature followed. I raised a hand and it did the same. It mirrored me, like a child learning a parent's mannerisms. Despite the fact that it had no eyes to see me, love is blind, or so they say. I knew this creature would do anything for me, and I did. The creature helped me up and steadied me on my feet. Underneath, my husband groaned a little, yet remained unconscious. Both of us looked down at my husband's prone body, detached, the hindrance that stood between us and the life we wanted. Oh, how glorious it would be. Now that we had each other, the next step was to get rid of the obstacle. Hours later, there was no sign of Frank. At least, nothing discernible. We reenacted so many of those violent fantasies. But as much as I wanted to hear him scream, we couldn't alert the neighbors. His vocal cords were severed first, but the look of abject, mute horror and agony on his face was worth it. We left before morning came, catching a brand new day to start a new life. We needed sustenance for the road, so we ate and drank as much as we could. By the time they found his bones, they would be bleached by the sun, poised on the bed pathetically, if not a little melancholic. I made sure no one would come looking for a while. It was a fair trade after all. One man's nightmare was a woman's dream.